8 millimeter by Austin Taylor. When there's no more room in hell, the evil will walk the earth. Unknown. Chapter 1. It's been a couple of years since this incident occurred. I was just a kid. I remember every single detail. Things like this you just don't forget. I lived in a very small town. A town so small that they would roll up the road and put it behind the city hall, and at 6 a.m. the next morning, they would roll it back out. My childhood seemed normal enough. I had a good family, good friends, and I myself was in decent health. Around the fall season, my teacher asked us to make a video about the Earth for our environmental class. Those videos where you basically film everything outside, such as the trees and flowers. She also told us we would get extra credit if the video had some creative spin on it. I wasn't sure as to what she meant by creative spin, but I was interested nonetheless. I always loved to make videos, especially for class because I have an audience to present the project to. I go home that day, all excited. I walk through the front door while my parents were watching TV in the other room. I asked my dad if he happened to own a camera because if not, I was going to have to buy one. He tells me that he used to have an old Super 8 camera and that it should still be up in the attic somewhere. This is perfect. If I can find that camera and it still works, that could be my extra credit. I mean, that sounds pretty creative if you ask me. A video recorded all on film? That's perfect. I went upstairs and pulled down the attic door. A cloud of dust hits me as it creaks open. With the click of a light bulb, I'm now surrounded by old artifacts from the past. There was all sorts of things up there, such as guns, clothes, and toys. There was even an old glass chess set, all the pieces lined up perfectly. At the base of the set says a quote, "Why be a king when you can be a god?" I found myself remembering that quote later in life. Funny how some simple and random things just stick with you. The light of the attic shined on the glass, which also lit up a dark spot in the corner of the area, and sitting there light a box. I opened it and found the Super 8 camera. It looked beautiful. It was black and silver and had a strap on the handle so you can carry it with you to make it look more sophisticated. There was even unused film cartridges and a projector in there with it. It's like I was meant to find it that day. I take the box downstairs to show my dad, and he was surprised to see it as well. He said the last time he saw that camera was when his parents used to tape birthday parties in the late 60s. I run across the street to show my two best friends, Josh and Chris. They thought it was really cool. We put in a film cartridge to give it a try. Each cartridge can film up to 3.5 minutes of footage. That is, if you have it set to 16 frames a second. If you switch the frame rate to 24, you get maybe a little over a minute. After a long day of filming random stuff, we go up the street to our local store. They have a photo section in the back, and believe it or not, they still develop old film. Our friend David that works back there usually hooks us up when we bring anything to develop. I used to be real big in photography, and he would develop my prints free of charge, mainly because I used to give him a bunch of old coins. He liked that sort of thing. We ran home and put our film into the projector and turned it on. Everything we had filmed all day was there. Me filming some cars drive by, Chris flipping off the camera, and Josh pulling down his pants and mooning the camera. I'm sitting there watching the film in pride because I'm not just gonna get an A+, but an A++. This is as creative as it can get. I go to bed early that night because I was going to get up incredibly early to get started on my project. That morning alarm clock didn't come quick enough. I spent most of the night tossing and turning. I couldn't help it. I was too excited. I cannot wait to see the reaction on my teacher's face, and then having the rest of the class wish they had thought of my idea. I walk up to this area where it's an open field up the street from my house. I felt like that would be a perfect shot for the opening of the film. I set up my camera, adjusted the focus, and zoomed in. I take a deep breath and my finger pulls the trigger to start rolling. It was off to a great start. I had got some incredible shots of the trees and the sky. About 2 minutes into filming, when the cartridge was about to end, I can hear some yelling a few feet ahead of me. I zoom in further to see one of my neighbors arguing with his wife. I didn't know this guy personally. All I knew is that his name was Isaac, and he lived there with his wife and 4 kids. He was considered the local asshole. I recalled one time when I was riding my bike up and down the street, and he came outside and threw a bunch of glass onto the road. I ended up running over it and popping both of my tires, and there he was, right in front of my shot, getting yelled at. I felt that this would be funny footage to look at later, so I zoom in even further. What I saw in those next few moments would haunt me to this very day. Isaac pulls out a wire of some sort and wraps it around his wife's neck. He pulls harder and harder, and his wife struggles with every tug. Within a few seconds, she was completely out of sight of the camera. All I saw was Isaac looking down at her body. I start to hyperventilate. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. I look back into the eyepiece and see him staring right at me. I start to panic. I quickly grab my camera and run for my life back to my house. I could see Isaac running after me, way back in the distance. I ran so fast to the point where I felt like I was going to pass out, but I was not going to slow down for anything. If I had stopped, even for a second, he probably would have gotten me. I run into my house and grab my mother in tears. I explained to her what I saw, and she followed up what I said by asking if I remembered to take my medicine. I must tell you that when I was little, I suffered from severe hallucinations. My doctor gave me these purple pills to take every time I see anything abnormal or even supernatural. When she told me that, I felt some sort of relief. Maybe I did make this up in my head. It sure has happened before. I take my medicine and go upstairs to play some video games. I sit there a while and then look over at my desk where the camera is sitting. I pause my game, open the camera and pull out the cartridge. A lot of things were going through my head. I didn't know if what I saw was real or not. Was it? Chapter 2. Nighttime came really fast. Faster than most nights. I couldn't sleep. I spent most of the night staring out my bedroom window. I kept thinking that he was watching me out there somewhere, just waiting for me to shut my eyes so he can come inside and kill me. Around midnight, my house was quiet. Dead quiet. My parents must be asleep. I put on my coat and shoes, grabbed a flashlight, and went outside. I walked up the road to Isaac's house, and with every step I took, my heart would skip a beat. All the lights were turned off except for one in the garage. I sneak up to the closed door, step onto a crate, and peek into the little window. I could see Isaac shoving what appears to be all of his wife's things into garbage bags. It was real. I fucking knew it. My breathing speeds up. I lose my balance, fall off the crate, and crash into some metal trash cans. I know Isaac must have heard that. I get up as quickly as I could and ran home. I burst down the front door and call 911. My parents wake up in a panic, wondering what was going on. By the time they got me to stop crying, the police were knocking on the door. I explained to them what I saw and walked them down the street to Isaac's house. The cops knock on the garage door and Isaac opens it. He welcomes the cops and asks them what's the problem. I run into the garage and open up the garbage bags, and just as I thought, it was full of his wife's things. The cops ask him what he's doing, and Isaac says that he was setting up for a yard sale. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Yard sale? You've got to be kidding me. This is bullshit. I walk up to Isaac and ask him where's his wife. He laughs and says that she went with her friends to a concert and that she would be back tomorrow. The cops apologize for the intrusion and leave. I go back home to both my parents looking at me with serious concern. They told me it was all in my head and I need to keep my medication with me at all times. They send me up to bed and I lay down. So she will be home tomorrow then, huh? We will see about that. When I got up that morning, I hid under the bed until both my parents left for work. They usually check my room to make sure I made it to the school bus. I heard my mother's footsteps coming up the stairs, her high heels peek into my room, and then leave. I waited for a few moments and then came out from under the bed. I grabbed the film cartridge and lock it up in a little box. If what I think is on this film, I need to keep it safe. I kick the box underneath my bed, grab my things, and go outside. Hiding in a bush right next to his house, I'm ready to see if his wife actually comes home. About an hour goes by, and a yellow car pulls into the driveway, and gets out appears to be a woman. Even though I was next door, I was still too far to see her face. I quickly hop over the bush and stood by the side of the house. I can hear her knock, and the sound of the door opening. Isaac's voice says, "Hey, honey," and I hear a kissing noise. So that was his wife? My head starts to ache, and I reached into my pocket and took another pill. Maybe I am going crazy. I sit on the curb waiting for the bus to come by, and out comes Josh and Chris. They come up to me wondering why I wasn't at school that day. I tell them the whole story, even the parts that might not be real. They thought I was joking at first. When I took them to my room and showed them the cartridge, their faces turned a pale white. Josh said to verify if the story is true or not, that we should get the film developed. I then said that I didn't want to do that because I was really afraid that I would be right. I was also afraid that I would be wrong too, and that's another problem altogether. "What do we do?" says Chris. "We need more evidence. Maybe if you guys can prove what I am seeing is real, then we will know," I replied. Then Chris had the great idea of breaking into his house to see if we happened to find anything out of the ordinary. I told them to go home and eat dinner. Don't make your parents think we're up to anything fishy, and meet me outside my house at 8 p.m. sharp. We're going to do a little investigating. Chapter 3. I tried not to look suspicious at dinner. I told my parents that I was going to hang out with my friends for a little while, and they weren't worried. It was Friday night. They were used to me being out late anyways. There wasn't a whole lot of mischievous things to do in this small town. If we lived in a much bigger town, I could see my parents having concerns. Anyways, I didn't do too bad making sure I did not bring too much attention to myself. I couldn't say the same for Josh and Chris. Their parents got suspicious and started to ask questions like, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" They panicked and said that we were just going to walk around the neighborhood. You know damn well that kids my age at that time weren't walking around the neighborhood. They were either drinking, doing drugs, or having sex. Remember when I said a moment ago that there wasn't anything to do in this town? Well, that was just for me. I was too much of a pussy to do anything like that, and I guess that's why my parents trusted me enough to go out at night. Now, I must say that there were some troublemakers out there. I would occasionally bump into those types of people being idiots and stealing bottles of Frost liquor and Red Apple cigarettes. Except for a couple of goofballs like us, we weren't cool enough to do those types of things. Anyways, their parents sent them to their room and was not allowed to hang out with me. I really needed them to come with me, so I stood at their bedroom window, quietly tapping on the glass. They both opened the window and came out. We snuck up to Isaac's house, and to our surprise, he wasn't home. This was our chance to sneak in. We went around the back and cut the chains on the basement doors with some things I got from my dad's toolbox. It was so dark down there, our flashlights didn't help that well. The sound was low enough that you could hear little noises all around us. There was a sound of a leaky pipe gently tapping on the floor, but we couldn't find where it was coming from. A mouse squeaking in the corner somewhere, probably looking for food until we hear his neck snap due to the trap placed there. The snap of the mouse trap startled us, but we kept our cool. We were on a mission, and I especially was determined to uncover the truth. The mist of the cold night filled the basement, making it hard to see a few feet in front of your face. We managed to find the stairs, went up and looked around the house, and we didn't really see anything that caught our eyes. The house was really nice for the best part. Everything in there was placed just so. I could tell because along the wall in the living room was a collection of vinyl records. Every record there was only from the 80s era. At least this man had good taste. From Huey Lewis and the News to Michael Jackson to Chicago. The list goes on. My point is that every album was placed in the order in which they were released. I looked even closer to the Huey Lewis section, and one record was missing. It was 1983's Sports. It didn't strike me as odd that particular moment. Maybe it was just an unfinished collection. I can relate. I've got a few unfinished collections at home myself, like baseball cards and such. I was getting desperate to find any sort of evidence. I know there has to be something. We decided to split up to save time. I went into his bedroom and opened up his closet. Lying on the floor was one of those tarot cards. It was the card of death. A quote read on the bottom of a skull and crossbones. "Kiss the devil and say goodnight, for you will not live very long tonight." At that moment I heard a noise that made my heart drop. A car was pulling into the driveway. I can hear Josh and Chris in the other room yelling for me to get out of there. As I was leaving the bedroom, his front door opens. I didn't have time. Josh and Chris already went back down and out through the basement, and I was stuck. I had to hide. I hide inside the far corner of the closet, trying my hardest not to make a peep. The footsteps get louder and louder as my heartbeat gets faster. The door opens, and in walks Isaac. He opens the closet door to place his jacket there. I was hiding behind some clothes so that I wouldn't be spotted. He lays down on the bed directly in front of me. I could see him through the cracks of the closet door. What felt like an eternity later, he seemed to have fallen asleep. I slowly started to crawl out of the closet. It took me a minute because every move I made risked a sound. By the time I finally stepped out and started to head for the bedroom door, my feet made a creak noise as I stepped onto one part of the wooden floor. Isaac wakes up and looks at me dead in the eye, like a lion looking at his prey. I ran as fast as I could, down through the basement and out from where we all started. When I made it almost into the next yard, Josh and Chris yelled at me from behind. They were wondering why I ran out of the house screaming. I was confused. They didn't run out when they saw Isaac pull up? I could have sworn I heard them leave. Maybe not. Wait a minute. They yelled at me, right? I could have sworn I heard them. Chris spoke up and told me that Isaac never showed up. I turned to look at the driveway and there was no car there. My mind was playing games with me yet again. My parents were right. I fucking need those pills. I break down and hug both my friends. We all went home and I went up to my room to be alone. I didn't know what was real anymore. Maybe I was finally starting to lose my mind. I took another purple pill and went to bed. Tomorrow is another day. Chapter 4. My alarm clock beeps and my eyes open. I get dressed and head outside to the bus stop. The sun still hadn't come up yet. The bus pulls up a few minutes later after I arrive there. I hop on, and as the bus passes Isaac's house, his car was there. He showed up after we left last night. Did he notice anything? Maybe the broken chain on the basement doors, or objects moved around in the house? I sure hope not. I need another pill before class. When I arrive at school, I gulp down another pill and chase it down at the water fountain. I enter my classroom to see Chris and Josh already there, waiting for me. We had some time to talk to one another before class officially started. I told them that we would never speak about last night. As far as their parents knew, they were in their room, safe and sound that night. Our teacher tells us to calm down and get to our seats. Today was the day the video project was due. I completely forgot all about it. When it got to me, I told her that I couldn't finish it. My teacher gave me an F. I didn't really care. I had bigger problems than a stupid video project. I kept to myself all day until I came home from school. My mental state was really messing with me. What I saw had to be real. Even if it wasn't, he has to be up to something. The truth lies on that 8mm film sitting in my room. I want to see what's on it, but on the other hand, I don't want to also. When my parents got home, my mother told me I had another appointment at my therapist's office. I've been going there ever since I was 6 years old. I hate it there. I know I have a problem. I don't need some stranger to tell me that and charge out the ass for it. I had met a new doctor that day, and his name was Dr. John Unteregger. He hadn't been practicing medicine long, as far as I remember. He was at least a few months fresh out of college. I couldn't focus in his office. I had too much on my mind. It was going like a broken pinball machine. Whenever the doctor asked me a question, I answered, I think. Maybe I didn't, and that would explain him ordering a higher dose of those fucking purple pills. I can't stand those things. The thin coating breaks away too easy and I end up tasting the bitter medicine inside it. The shit makes me feel funny anyway, so why is he ordering a higher dose? I pick up those godforsaken pills on the way home and took my first one at dinner. It didn't kick in right away. I was planning on watching a movie first before bed, and right when I pushed play on the remote, the pills packed a punch and I fell asleep. Waking up in the middle of the night in pure darkness is always scary, even through the eyes of an adult. I wiped the drool off my face and pillow and stumbled downstairs to the kitchen, made myself a sandwich, and when I began passing the hallway, the front door appears to be wide open. How in the hell did that happen? I was almost certain I locked the door before I went to bed. Shutting the door and then seeing a silhouette of a tall man behind me was enough to make me freeze. It was him. It was Isaac, staring right at me. His deep voice softly tells me that he wants the film. As scared as I was, I stand my ground and say no. Within a second, he starts to run towards me. I dropped my sandwich and covered my eyes like a shield. My eyes open again, and I am in my bed. It was a dream. I'm fucking done with these pills. I don't even need them. Right when I made that decision in my head, my mother strolls in with my next dose. I put it in my mouth and fake drink a tiny sip of water. When my mom left the room, I quickly ran to the bathroom to spit the meds out. The capsule had already melted due to the water, and I washed my mouth out at the sink. This was going to be my first day without my meds. I showed up to school and sat down at my desk. Josh and Chris were concerned because I would normally chat with them for a bit before class officially starts. They come walking over to my desk, and they were wondering what the issue was. I told them the truth, and they immediately changed the subject. I wanted to go back to Isaac's house to look around again. Maybe there was something we overlooked. There just had to be. That night we meet in the middle of the road, loaded with flashlights and a weapon just in case. Going back to the doors of the basement, the broken chains were held together with zip ties. Isaac saw the damage. Did he suspect us? I take out my pocket knife and snip the ties bounding the chains in place. We go inside and up the stairs to the main part of the house. I go back into his bedroom closet where I found the tarot card before. It was too dark to tell at the time, but whenever I was hiding there before, I felt a box down by my side. Reaching inside the closet and pulling out the box to find it full of unlabeled VHS tapes. I put one into the TV in his room and pressed play. The visuals I saw haunts me to this very day. It was a POV shot going down into the basement, and a hand lifting the floorboards revealing multiple dead women. The bodies were too mutilated to see who they were. It occurred to me at that moment that I skipped my meds today. Was this all in my head? I needed a second opinion. I holler for Josh and Chris, and they come into the room. Playing the tape for them, they confirm that they saw the same thing as me. It was real. This man is a murderer. I put the box of tapes back into the closet where they were and ran down to the basement, taking a crowbar lying there and lifting up the floorboards to find nothing. Absolutely nothing. Where were all the bodies? Chris and Josh came up with that maybe the footage was taken way before I was born. That would explain it being VHS. Maybe he had cleaned up the bodies because of the obvious smell they would produce with time. We all got out of there as quick as we could, so fast that Josh fell over in his front yard, losing one of his shoes. We weren't going back to get it. We all were in panic mode and were set on calling the police. I told them to not say a word of this incident. This was really dangerous after all. We went our separate ways and went home. I lied down and once again glanced at the 8mm film cartridge. There are 3 sides to every story. His side, my side, and the truth on that damn film. Chapter 5. I was awake all night long. I couldn't sleep after what I witnessed. My right hand smacks the alarm clock just 1 second before it goes off. Moments later, my mother strolls into the room with another dose of the purple pills. I pull off the same stunt by fake drinking the water and then spitting the capsule in the bathroom sink. When I arrive at school, I notice that Chris and Josh weren't present. Did this situation really scare them that much? I mean, I was scared as well, but that doesn't mean you have to hide. We can be scared together. To a certain degree, I was quite bitter that they would do me like that after all we've been through. After school, when the bus drops me off, I stomp my way to their house ready to yell at them. When I arrived to their front yard, it was full of police cars blasting their red and blue lights. I'm no longer stomping. I'm running. Their mother and father are standing at the front door. The father is talking to one of the policemen while the mother cries and blows her nose on some tissue she had in her pocket. I asked them what was going on, and the policeman explained that they both went missing late last night. So when we parted ways last night, they disappeared. I knew who did it, and I wasn't afraid to tell the cops. Isaac did it. There's no other human on this earth who could have done this. I marched to his house with about 5 cops following. I knocked on the door and took several steps back to hide behind the cops. They had the guns, after all. Isaac answers the door, and I light into his ass. Screaming accusations at him like a jury in a courtroom, Isaac starts laughing like he hasn't sinned even one time in his life. He explained that he went out of town yesterday and didn't come home until about an hour ago, basically saying it's not possible that he did it. I didn't believe his bullshit. I continued to scream and holler directly to his face until the 5 officers pulled me away and apologizing for disturbing him. They threatened to throw me in jail if I didn't leave him alone. As I'm walking back to my house, I can see the blinds of Isaac's house creak open to get a good look at my walk of shame. I locked myself in my room. I had to organize some sort of plan. About an hour later, the mailman comes by, so I run out there. I open the mailbox to find some letters, most of which were for my parents except for one addressed to me. The letter is from Isaac. The letter says that he knew that me and my friends were the ones inside his house and to stop doing that, or there will be trouble. After reading the letter, I looked to my left, looking a few houses down to watch Isaac's window blinds close. He was watching and waited for me to open the letter, just like my walk of shame from earlier. I hop on my bike and ride up the street to town and walk into the police station. I demanded to see the chief, and they sent me to the back to speak to him. Chief Jacob Hansen was on his badge, yet his desk said a different name. Apparently he was just added to the force. The previous chief was fired for unknown reasons. I know all of this information doesn't matter. I just want to show you, the reader, how scatterbrained I was at that moment. I explained to him that my neighbor did all of this. He's killed people. Innocent people. I watched him murder his wife for fuck's sake. Chief Jacob immediately remembers me. One of the cops that left my friend's residence earlier told him about how fucked up in the head I was. He tells me that disappearances in this small town happen all the time, that it was quite common and there was very few things that they could do. I lost it at this point, jumping up from my seat and screaming in his face. He asks me to leave, or he would have to take me in. I couldn't believe that the police wouldn't help. So let's see if I got this right. My parents think I'm crazy, and now the police of the town think I'm just bothering my neighbor for shits and giggles. Before I leave his office, I say right to his face that I will expose this guy one way or another, if that means I might die trying. As I start to walk out of the station, my eyes glance at the missing persons board, the faded faces of the lost people of the town, with my friend's picture in the center of it all. As I start to head back home, I stop at Isaac's house. I had an idea. I pull out my notepad in my pocket and leave him a letter of his own. The letter read, "I know what you did, and you will pay for it in the end. Mark my words." I quickly pedal back home and set up a little tent in my front yard. With binoculars, I can get a pretty good view of his house. Nighttime comes fast, and the streetlights turn on. He hasn't bothered coming outside yet. Maybe he saw the tent. I had it pretty well hid behind a small bush. It was also camouflage. There is no way he could see me, right? Around 10 p.m., his porch lights come on, and I could see the silhouette of him walking towards the mailbox. Watching him open the letter I left there made my heart sink. Maybe it was a bad idea to do that, thinking about it now. With the lights of the street barely keeping him lit, I can see him turn his head towards my way. I can't even describe his facial expression into words. The amount of hatred and anger I saw looking at me will haunt me for the rest of my life. At any moment I was afraid he was going to break in and kill me and my parents, but he didn't. He just stood there for an uncomfortable amount of time, still staring in my direction. After at least a good 15 minutes, he finally walks back inside his house, letter in hand. I quickly run into the house, locking all doors and windows and hiding under my bed. I didn't know what was yet to come, and frankly, I didn't want to know. Chapter 6. I skipped school again today. I told my parents that I was too sick to go by pulling one of those old tricks. Sticking a thermometer underneath a hot light bulb or rubbing your forehead raw to make it hot works like a charm every time. I had walked next door to Chris and Josh's house. Their parents were just about to go put up a bunch of missing flowers all around the town. I asked if I could join them. I cared about them too. We didn't talk most of the day. They were pretty silent for the most part. I mean, can you blame them? Their two sons mysteriously vanished off the face of the earth. I felt their pain. The only time anyone spoke a word was when I was alone in the car with their mother. She wondered why I flipped out the other day and yelled at Isaac. She was too far across the street to hear the situation and in a fragile state of mind. I just flat out and said it to her. Isaac kidnapped your sons. I can see her eyes get big in the rearview mirror. What was that you said? She replied. I again repeat myself, and she gets angry and upset with me. How dare you say that about him? He wouldn't do anything like that. We see him on a weekly basis at church. There is no way he did this, she replied. I didn't say anything else after that. I wasn't shocked nor surprised at her response. It's like I'm in a crowded room, screaming at the top of my lungs and nobody can hear me. After sitting there in the back seat for a few minutes, I get out of the car and walk away. On my way home, I stop by my doctor's office. I asked to talk to Dr. Unterreger. The lady typing on the computer asks if I had an appointment, and I said no. I begged her to make just one exception. When I gave her the $20 in my pocket, she then sent me to the back. Money talks, I guess. I knock on his office door and he invited me inside. He had a look of concern, and I honestly cannot blame him. I was concerned for me. Telling him the story thus far was extremely difficult to do. I was holding back tears through most of it, but lost it eventually. When I got around to the end, I expected to have him laugh in my face or ask if I stopped taking my medication, but instead he believed me. He actually believed me. He did ask if I bothered to get any help from the police, and I told him that situation. He thinks real hard. I can tell because of the compulsive tapping on his desk. He decides to take me home so he could let my parents know. That's a really good idea. At least they won't think I'm crazy anymore. We hop into his car and he turns on the radio to calm me down. He winds the knob over to K. Billy's Super Sounds of the 70s. Nice choice. If he played anything from the 80s station, I might have started crying again. We chatted a bit as the radio played some Bee Gees. I started to calm even more now because I knew that it was all over. The police would be informed that everything I said was true, and they will come banging on his door and send his ass to jail. While in my trance, a car ahead of us was blasting his music a lot louder than ours. It was Speed Demon by Michael Jackson, released in 1987 on the album Bad. No, it can't be possible. The car takes a sharp U-turn and accelerates towards us. We both scream and it slams into us with abrupt force. The car flies into the air, flipping 6 times before landing upside down in the middle of the road. My head was spinning. My vision was blurry. I didn't know which way was up. I quickly unbuckle myself, which sends me falling to the roof part of the car. I tried to unhook Unterreger, but he didn't make it. His side of the car had caved in. His whole left side of his body was crushed. The entire car was covered in his blood as well as my own. Right then and there, that car comes up and stops right in front of the wreckage. I screamed, and the man got out of his car, walked up, and just stood there. What's this guy's deal? Did he hear me? Maybe he's deaf. I yell again and he peeks down into the window. It was Isaac. He crashed into the car, leaving us in a bloody mess. He begins to laugh and goes to open the passenger door. He pulls my legs out, carries me to his car, and throws me into the trunk. I yelled so loud that I lost my voice. He's got me. What do I do? I can hear him roaming around while in the trunk. He opens the back seat door and pulls out something. Moments later, I hear an explosion. He covered Unterreger's car in gasoline and blew it to pieces. At least that's what I read in the newspapers. He then hops back into the car and drives off. Halfway down the road, I can hear the sirens coming by to go to the crash site. They won't find much. From what I heard, that explosion sounded like there wouldn't be anything left. Probably wouldn't even be able to identify the body left behind. The car made a couple of turns for a bit, and then made a quick stop. It turns off, and I can hear Isaac getting out and walking around to the trunk. When he opened it, I tried to act quick, but was immediately hit with something that knocked me out. I don't know what happened for the next few hours, as I was unconscious. My eyes open and I'm locked in his basement, my mouth gagged and my feet bound to the wall. The chain attached to the wall was long enough so I was able to get up and walk to a little window. Pulling off the gag, I tried to yell for help, but nobody could hear me. I was between a rock and a hard place. Chapter 7. The warm blood drips down my face and lands onto my shirt and floor. I'm bound to a wall in a nasty-ass basement of a murderer. I occasionally try to yell while standing at the little window, and there's just no use. I even saw one of my classmates riding a skateboard down the road. His name was Cameron, I believe. I yelled so loud that his facial expression made it seem like he heard me, but continued skating up the road. Isaac was never home during the day and wouldn't come home until late at night. I would fall asleep and wake up the next morning to find a plate of food. The food looked mostly like scraps from the trash. Half of them were moldy and smelled like ass. I still ate, though. I was really hungry. I just plugged my nose and downed whatever was placed in front of me. It was a case of survival at this point. This went on for a few days. Eventually I understood Isaac's schedule, and it never changed. I started doing more exploring in the basement during the day while he was gone. With the lights shining in, I was able to see more of them when I was exploring at night. The basement was full of boxes, none of which had anything that was going to help me. On the opposite side of the room, there was a mini tool station. The chain that's attached to the wall only goes so far, and it made the mini tool station a few feet too far from reach. There was a broomstick, again about a foot too far. I lied on the ground and pulled my body along the floor to try and get the broom. A few hours of thinking, I made the decision that I wasn't going to be able to reach it unless I either break my foot off or use something that could somehow pop it out of the shackles. I wasn't going to fucking die down here. I pulled with all my strength and ended up popping one of my ankles out of socket. Although I was still chained, I was finally able to reach the broom. I didn't let the pain get to my head just yet. If I was going to get out of this alive, I was going to have to fight. I grabbed the end of the broom and used it to push off a saw sitting on the table. Sliding it over to me and sawing the shackles took much longer than it took retrieving the broom. This took a good day and a half. By the time I sawed off both shackles, my right ankle was blue. The sun was about to pass the horizon. Isaac was about to get home. I need to call the police. I stood up and limped my way to the stairs. I couldn't go through the basement window. Believe me, that was my first choice, but he had bolted it tight the day I was placed there. The stairs went up very steep. I didn't think I was going to make it all the way up there. I was thinking about giving up and just letting go, dropping down the stairs and letting the hard floor break my fall. Maybe I wouldn't survive, but I wasn't about to quit. I got to the top step and pulled up into the kitchen. My foot throbbed in pain, and I needed to get back on my feet. I was too scared to pop my foot back in, and I knew the longer I waited, the worse it was going to hurt. I pulled myself up on the table and leaned against it, and on the count of 3, I stomped down on the kitchen floor. With one pop and crackle sound, my foot was locked back in place, and boy did I scream. I have never experienced so much pain in my life. I was able to walk, but very little. I had a terrible limp. All the doors were locked, and the windows were boarded up in the house. This guy was thinking outside the box. Maybe he thought, what if I got out eventually? He would have to make sure I wouldn't escape. I went back to his bedroom to try and find a key or something. Laying on his bed was a dress and a wig. How suspicious. Was this outfit worn by Isaac that day I waited for his wife to return home? Also, the box that carried those VHS tapes before was sitting by the TV. I opened the box to find a DVD sitting on top of all the tapes. Again, like the tape, this one didn't have a label either. Just blank. Placing it into the DVD player and pressing play revealed my 2 best friends, Chris and Josh. They were both tied up in chairs while Isaac paces back and forth behind them. He turns on the record player, and what comes on? Huey Lewis. It was the album Sports, the exact one that was missing from his collection. Isaac starts dancing to the beat and grabs a plastic bag and starts to suffocate Josh. Their cries can barely be heard over the loud music. Josh struggled very hard until his body went limp. Isaac did the same to Chris moments later. The video then cuts to another 2 people tied up, their bodies covered with a sheet so I could not see who they are. I can tell that it was a man and a woman, one in a button-up shirt and jeans, while the other one in a dress and heels. Isaac again continues to play Huey Lewis, and this time he takes them one at a time into the bathroom and dunks them into his tub. They struggled as the giant bubbles begin to fade away. I start to panic and cry. I got to get the hell out of here. The kitchen chairs seemed strong enough. I took one of them and started bashing at the back screen door. The wooden boards there moved a little with every slam. I kept bashing and bashing until the door finally opened, limping into his backyard to see a shallow grave. Was this going to be for me? Right next to mine was several other graves, but they were filled in. They were all labeled with people's names. The names that I recognized were Chris, Josh, and Nikki, Isaac's wife. Chapter 8. His backyard reeked. I remembered that many people complained about the smell before, but nobody had the courage to tell him. I would have never known that he had a whole fucking cemetery back there. The truth was finally out. Isaac murdered his wife, and I recorded that incident on my Super 8 camera. While I sat there on the ground collecting my thoughts, some headlights pull up right behind me. I blocked the bright lights with my hands, trying to see who was in front of me. After a few moments of allowing my eyes to adjust, the figure getting out of the car was Chief Jacob Hansen. He was apparently patrolling the neighborhood when he noticed me in Isaac's backyard. I limp up to him and began to panic. I tried to explain to him what all has happened since I last left him. I could see on his face that he was somewhat concerned, especially from my posture. I wasn't standing right, and I was extremely close to tears. I point over to the homemade graveyard behind me. His eyes get big and he starts to panic. He reaches for his radio, and before he could dispatch anyone over, his chest bursts open. The mist of blood splashes all over me. Upon falling to the ground, revealed Isaac standing there, shotgun in hand. My screams were so loud they covered up the next round from the shotgun, which missed me about a half-inch away. I ran down the street and went into my house. All of the lights were off. I yelled for my parents, but there was no answer. The sound of the television turns on, and I ran into the living room to find the bodies of my parents. They were the two victims in the video that drowned in the bathtub. They were sitting on the couch propped up and still wearing the same clothes. They were already starting to decompose, and I can't even describe the smell. Their arms and legs were bound to the couch, except for my dad's right hand on the remote. A wire ran from his wrist to the TV to trigger it on. Isaac turned my parents into dead puppets. I didn't even have time to cry. The front door bursts open, and it's Isaac with his shotgun. I ran up the stairs. Isaac slowly followed. I ran into my room and grabbed the film cartridge and placed it into my pocket. I also grabbed the phone and dialed 911. Isaac is almost halfway up the stairs at this point, spouting such words as, "Run and hide. Run and hide, little man." When the 911 operator finally gets through to me, I didn't have time to really explain. I just yelled, "Help." I ran into the hallway, pulled down the attic door, and climbed up. I pulled up the doors just as Isaac's footsteps stopped. He was upstairs with me. Reaching up to turn the light on, I'm surrounded by tons of old boxes. The attic door begins to pull down. I tug on the rope with all my might until it falls from my grasp, and the rope cuts my hands as it lets go. Isaac slowly walks up. Isaac slowly walks up now, saying, "You can't get away. I'm right behind you." I ran to the end of the attic to look down and see Isaac step into the room. "Give me that film," he replied. He loads the shotgun again and walks closer and closer. Once he was about an inch away from me, I closed my eyes in fear. My attention then changed to that glass chess set I saw a while back. The light of the attic shined upon it like a twinkling star. Isaac grabs me by my shirt and throws me onto the chess set. It smashes to pieces. He places the gun against my head and repeats himself again. "Give me that film, now." I quickly grab a shard of glass from the chess set and sliced up Isaac's leg. He screams in agony. I stand up and climb out of the window. My feet slip out from under me and I fall off the roof and hit the ground. My leg snapped on impact. I crawl into the street and cross over to Chris and Josh's yard. When I finally got up on my good leg, Isaac starts limping towards me, firing shots in the air. Their front door was wide open, so I just helped myself and went inside. It was at this moment when I discovered the bodies of Chris and Josh's parents. They appeared to have been beaten with a blunt object, maybe a Louisville slugger or something. Their bodies nailed to the wall in crucifix position, and their heads were modified with deer horns. Isaac comes into the house, and I run as fast as I could outside through the back. Upon running out there, I can see red and blue lights in the distance. Trying to keep my balance, I slip and fall into their swimming pool. While trying to come back up from underwater, something was weighing me down. Through the blurry vision of the water, it was Isaac. Every moment was crucial. I was panicking. The sound of the last bubbles leaving from my body made everything seem real. I have never been so scared in my entire life. All of a sudden, from underneath, I hear someone yell to put their hands above their head, and then a loud bang. The weight lifts, and I was able to come up for a breath. The policeman helps me out of the water. He had shot Isaac in the arm, as well as put him in handcuffs, and read him his rights. "I tried to tell you, and nobody listened to me," I yelled. The policeman apologized and helped me to the ambulance, which pulled up moments later. One of the cops rode with me. "I'm glad you're okay," he replied. "Don't mention it. It's just a flesh wound," I replied with sarcasm. I must have passed out on the rest of the ride up to the hospital. Most of it was fuzzy. It's like I was coming in and out of consciousness every few minutes. I wake up in the hospital the following day. My vision was distorted, but I was stabilizing. The doctor comes in and tells me I have a visitor. In walks Cameron, the kid I saw on the skateboard ways back. Apparently, he called the cops as well from hearing my screams and shotgun blasts. If he didn't call, I probably wouldn't be here to tell the tale today. When I dialed 911, the lady on the other line thought I was prank calling her and hung up. I asked him if our teacher can change my grade for my video project. Cameron laughs and says he'll see what he can do. About a week later, they released me from the hospital. I had cuts all over that required stitches as well as a huge cast on my right leg. They took me to the police station where I gave them the 8mm film cartridge. My friend David was there, and he quickly developed the film and handed it back to the cops. I sat there and watched them load it into the projector and turn it on. The film rolls. It starts with some shots of the trees and sky and then cuts to the field. The camera zooms into Isaac and his wife arguing, and he kills her by wrapping a wire around her neck. All the cops turn away in horror, while I kept watching. I've seen this film before. It doesn't bother me anymore. Isaac is now in jail where he belongs. Checkmate. Epilogue. 15 years later. We've reached the end of our little story. 15 years have passed on by. I've been pretty good. I still feel really rough since then. I'm suffering from PTSD and having to take some blue pills to treat that. Haha. Not to mention going to therapy once a week. As a matter of fact, it was my therapist who told me to write this book. Said it might help to tell my story. She was right. I do feel much better. But I sure wish I could have done more and not have all those people die because of me. They sure didn't deserve it. Isaac has been on death row all this time. Every time they took him to court, he would tell them another location where he buried some bodies, and then they would have to do another trial. He had at least 17 death penalties under his belt by this point. He's apparently been doing this since the 70s. As far as I know, he never had any sort of motive. Just got up one day and decided to kill. All it takes is one bad day, I guess. I didn't even think about it at the time, but when he murdered his wife that day, he had just murdered his kids as well. 3 of them came home from school, and when they went inside, he tied them all up and hung them from the tree in the backyard. He then went into the 4th child's room, who was only a few months old, and smothered her with a pillow. Even the deceased women that are on the VHS tapes, possibly past wives or girlfriends. One day while in prison, an officer was taking him back to his cell. Isaac and this man already had tension between them. When the man uncuffed him, Isaac whipped out a handmade shank and stabbed him in the throat. They took him back to court for another trial. The officer unfortunately died. This time they finally denied him in court recently and gave him the death sentence once again. Tomorrow at 2:30 p.m., he would be put to death by lethal injection. And I'm going. I need to see his face one last time to put my mind at ease. It would satisfy me to see his life fade away from his eyes. The next day I show up to the prison, approximately 1 state over from where our little incident occurred. I was greeted by one of the policemen inside there waiting in the lobby. Officer Nicholas Dominic was his name. He and I had a small conversation before it was time. He was telling me that when they asked him what he wanted for a last meal, he requested the same meal as John Wayne Gacy. This meal is a combination of a dozen deep-fried shrimp, a bucket of original recipe chicken from KFC, French fries, a pound of strawberries, and a bottle of Diet Coke. I'm honestly not at all surprised. He wanted to make an interesting impression, so why not copy one of many? He also asked to watch the film Scarface while he ate, but they denied him that. He was lucky enough to get that crazy meal request. The clock strikes 2:30, and another officer comes in to take me back. They sent me down a long, dark hallway leading to a large metal door with some light coming from underneath. The door opens, and inside is the viewing room. Chairs all throughout the area, with a big window in front covered by a red curtain. I was the only one there. Isaac had no family or friends. He killed them all. It was just me and him, face to face. The lights dim, and the curtain opens, and strapped to a table ahead of me is Isaac in the flesh. I haven't seen him in a long time, and there he was staring back at me. The officers walk into the room along with the doctor. A priest comes in behind them to give him last rites, which he aggressively rejected. He knew he was going to burn in hell. He said it himself. I guess since he wasn't getting out of this, he wasn't going to die an innocent man. Isaac stares at me with the most hatred look, just like he did many years ago. They attach an EKG machine to monitor his heart just to confirm when he dies. As the doctor pulls out the serum and injects it into his arm, I secretly pull out a mini camcorder to film his last moments. Isaac gets extremely angry and yells at me through the window until the serum runs its course. He nods off. The heart monitor flatlines. Isaac has died. I just wish they could have done it sooner. I placed the camcorder in my jacket pocket and left the prison. In the end, Karma will be a bigger bitch than he ever was. Justice was served today. I just hope I can finally move on with my life, maybe get a job, get married, and start a family. So I close my eyes to old ends and open my heart to new beginnings. This book was begun in Georgia on March 11th, 2019, and completed in Georgia on June 1st, 2019.